this is why I like having these conversations, because I honestly want somebody that I talk to tell me everything's going to be okay.
I am the wrong girl. I am very sorry. I specifically like all I read about, all of my research is in all of the ways this could go terribly wrong.
What makes us so special? And why isn't AI just simply going to replace us all? That's why I'm sitting down with educators, researchers, and practitioners to have an open and honest discussion about the human impact of AI. I'm Doug Atkinson, and join me for the human conversation. Rebecca Bultsma, AI ethics researcher, keynoter of note, and an all-around thought leader on AI. Thanks for being part of the human conversation.
That is my favorite kind of conversation to be a part of. So thank you for having me.
Well, I couldn't be happier to have somebody like yourself, who I think is seeing the same things that I'm seeing with regard to the opportunities, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats,
The SWOT
of it all.
analysis.
And there's lots of all of those here for AI. But let's start the conversation, because I saw something you posted on LinkedIn around the post that Matt Schumer did around his work with AI, and basically where he came out and said specifically, it does my job for me effectively. I mean, in so many words, he said, I can tell it what to do in a very complicated prompt, and then leave and come back, and it's done better than I would have done it myself. And he's a proper coder and CEO and startup guy. It bothered me, and I think it bothered him, and I think it bothers you, that it is gotten so good recently. And new models have just arrived. Literally, new models are arriving as we speak. But tell me a little bit about how that article struck you.
I read it when it just kind of first hit, and it really resonated because it hit a lot of things that I had been feeling that had been swirling around in my mind. A couple things that hit me right away were the fact that he pointed out that something has shifted in the last 6 weeks, which I have noticed. With the latest releases from ChatGPT and Anthropic, something has shifted. These models are shockingly, not to use the word smart, but efficient. They are light years beyond where I thought we would be now. Their capabilities to act on their own and do things for me that used to take a really, really long time is startling. And it caught me off guard, and he explained that in the same way that I was experiencing it. I wasn't sure if it was just something that was wowing me as a non-coder, that maybe this was mainstream in other industries, but he felt the same way that I did, which was big. I also noticed that he was saying some of the things that I've been thinking about, where I find myself often holding back so I don't sound like a lunatic screaming about how incredible AI is and how good it is. I'm more trying to soften it in the audiences I speak to say, yeah, AI is good, but it can't do the things you do. And what you do is so much more important. Don't worry, we'll always need humans to do these things. And as much as it pains me to say it, like the reality of what's happening right now in AI, there are a lot of things that AI can do. And I don't know that I'm helping people, or if it's even ethical at this point, to be telling people they have nothing to worry about. So
I agree with that.
So that gave me kind of permission, and I expect the post you saw was me more or less saying that. We do want people to be optimistic about the future. There's a lot of really amazing things coming, but I don't think we're helping people by telling them there's nothing to worry about anymore. So those are a few things that really kind of hit me in the Schumer essay. The other one that really kind of resonated, and I think it probably will for most people, is that experience of like the early days of the pandemic, right? Like I was on a cruise with my family. We were hearing whisperings of this overseas like illness. Maybe there was someone on the boat who was in the infirmary, but it was never like actually going to be that big of a deal. It was just we were hearing rumors of it. And in a matter of weeks, it was everywhere and it impacted everybody. And in the intro to the essay, Matt basically likens this to that. And that's problematic, like for a bunch of reasons, right? Like COVID was a biological event and there was verifiable data connected to that. AI, like kind of not so much. But, there is something that I could relate to because I keep forgetting I'm in a bubble where everybody's not talking about this yet, but it is going to impact everybody, I think.
Well, so I have gone through all the technological revolutions. I'm old. So I remember I was in college and in politics, my first profession, when the PC kind of hit, and we used it to win political campaigns. We introduced databases and did kind of high end. And at the time, it was a trick. We tricked people into thinking that we were handwriting letters and we were mail merging things, and we were doing it was a trick, and how could you write all these custom letters? You must really care. And truth of the matter is we were using technology to kind of hack the system at the time. But I didn't leave politics for that. I thought it was an interesting tool. And then I remember the internet, and when the internet hit me anyway, I was trying to work on blowing up the unemployment offices in Massachusetts, and the consultant came in and said we should use this thing called the internet and build these things called job banks and talent banks. And I thought, after I saw Netscape Navigator, I thought, well, I shouldn't be in politics anymore. I could see where that was going almost immediately. It was
Yeah.
like, this is all information, we're connecting one another with all this information. It's like, this is clearly going to have an impact. And so I taught myself HTML and became a web developer, and off I went and became, I've subsequently been in technology ever since. I remember the day I first saw ChatGPT, and I was frightened by it. I've never seen anything like that. And it literally, when it wrote out whatever prompt I gave it, and it wrote out the response, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I've never seen anything like that.
That was my exact experience. I was dumbfounded. I had like one of those Hollywood, like slow motion where I could kind of see a glimpse into the future of where it was heading. And I knew this was going to change everything. It was a weird premonition, but I knew.
It doesn't take again, my perspective is I've seen what these things will do eventually, and I always say that people, when I was first a web developer, everybody told me I'll never use a credit card in a computer. That's crazy. And I'll never take a commercial email in my inbox. That's spam. It'll never happen. I'll never accept it. And it's like, yeah, okay. And we're in that phase right now. We're in the Netscape Navigator phase of this thing, where I don't think the agents have arrived yet. And this is actually when you gave your keynote for our Insight Jam in December, you talked about automation and agents and the differences. And it feels to me like we're all trying to make our own agents in these kind of, self-service widget things. And they're kind of good and they're kind of not good, but these are not industrial strength tools that are being built right now that haven't arrived yet. That's my whole supposition. That's that the revolution will come in the form of salespeople, not in the form of us developing our own tools. It's the money that's been invested over the last 2 years in these companies that haven't arrived yet that are going to blow everybody's mind. And then that's when the hockey stick goes whoop, like when Netscape Navigator hit, or when, Lotus 123 hit in the PC, and everybody realized, oh, great. Okay. No, I see this now. This saves me time, money, lets me reduce headcount.
Well, if we would have had this conversation 2 weeks ago, I would have felt differently. But in the last 2 weeks, again, a new release by Anthropic. I'm not sure when this is going to air, so I guess we should just tell people that we're talking kind of mid to late February. But the latest release in the last week, I have maybe a to-do list of 40 things. I have my Claude Code build me a team of 40 agents that will go out, research those things, fact check those things, build backgrounders, make recommendations, build a board of directors that will help make important decisions from 20 angles, and then just give me a report of everything it's done for me to review. I have eliminated 11 of my software subscriptions, which we're starting to see in the stock market now. Real questions around SaaS companies and software because I've completely eliminated my task management software. I run that all through Claude now. I've completely eliminated a bunch of the things that now can be totally automated through a team of agents. So I would tell you, just as somebody who heavily is, and I'm not a developer, I don't code, just for the record, just a regular person experimenting with these tools. I think that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg here on what these agents are actually capable of as of the last month and how incredibly good they are.
So there's two narratives being spooled out. The narrative from the tech bro crowd, the builders,
Yep.
is that this is going to create abundance. It's going to be the greatest thing for in the history of society, and it's going to free up all our time, and we're going to have all this,
Yeah.
abundance.
That narrative serves that industry, right? It's
Well, of course, but the underlying story is that there is a
disruption.
what is it? The total something market, the TAM, whatever
Mhm.
the TAM is, right? The
Mhm.
total, and that's what they're going after. They're going after the head count, the body cost. That's how they're going to monetize this. That's the only way they monetize this.
Sure.
This doesn't this doesn't work any other way. You're
And yeah, and
you're
for
gonna
the
have to take
record,
out the
like, I'm
people.
not like I don't work for a tech company. I don't endorse particular products. I just experiment with everything. I have no skin in this game, and no real, like, expertise or benchmarks in how good or good this isn't. I just speak from my own personal experience of how this has been useful for me, like, as a regular person and what I'm seeing, but also as someone who then I see every problem and issue connected to this and where it all leads and the things that we need to be talking about connected to it, because we can't just pretend the emperor is wearing clothes. We can't just take at face value that this is going to solve all the world's problems. We'll all be able to sit around in cafes, eating grapes and uh, debating philosophy, like the story that's kind of being sold to us. We'll get to all just garden and do all the things we want to do because we'll have so much abundance. Like, I don't know that we can fully buy into that narrative. What do you think?
I think it will create abundance. I absolutely think it'll
Mm.
create abundance, but at what cost? I mean,
And for who?
capitalism, well, and for who? Capitalism is capitalism has never been particularly sensitive. and
Yeah,
and it's always been this balance of, well, we're all individual businesses.
sure.
And this is the thing that people, I think, don't recognize. It's like you sell your hours that are available to you for
Mhm.
dollars to a company,
Yeah, your
and
attention, the
and the
attention
company
economy.
values your
Mhm.
your your hours and your bandwidth, and it pays for that very specifically to get what it gets out of it. But if it can get that some other way, I mean, again, I always think about, and I've been fired in places and I've left places, and I always think, well, that whole thing's going to fall apart because they don't have me around anymore, and it doesn't. Nothing ever
Mhm.
falls apart. We're all totally expendable.
Yeah.
and
Well, but that's
and
a good
so
point too, because, maybe everything will correct. Like we talk about all these jobs that might be lost, but you look at the largest mass layoff of female workers in human history was like, I think mid last century when all the women who used to manually connect phone calls into a switchboard
Mm.
were laid off in the telecom industry. But you look at the amount of people the telecom industry employs now, and there's so many more women, right? Like it just kind of, like you mentioned, you think it's all going to fall apart, but we go on, and in your case, the company somehow managed to survive without you, despite losing their probably greatest asset. But maybe, like maybe we recorrect, and people always optimistically say there's going to be jobs we haven't even considered or heard of yet, and maybe that's true.
Well, and I think that probably is true. Uh, I think most definitely that will be true. Well, and this is this is why I like having these conversations, because I honestly want somebody that I talk to tell me everything's going to be okay.
I am the wrong girl. I am very sorry. I specifically like all I read about, all of my research is in all of the ways this could go terribly wrong, right? Like my whole thing, like ethics in general, especially technology ethics, is about harm and power dynamics and who wins and who loses in these conversations, and um, whose voices get heard, whose voices get silenced, who wins and who loses, right? Like that's the whole ethics is about trade-offs. And so I live in the space with this is amazing, but at what cost?
This is the other concern I have, is the way that this has been unleashed. It is unleashed without, for all intents and purposes, any throttle.
Oh,
It's trampling over copyright
oh.
and name, image, likeness. I mean, it is absolutely. I mean, the latest release of Seed Dance.
Right?
Every video that comes out of Seed Dance right now is an absolute reprehensible ripoff of either
Yeah.
existing IP or,
And they've had
people's
some strong letters
images,
from
likenesses.
Disney
And
about
they're
that.
getting well, and so and this is the thing, it's we're in international waters, right? So that
Mm,
is a Chinese release, and they don't seem to care one whit about US copyright, nor necessarily should they, or any international copyright, which forces the West and the AI companies of the West to say, well, we can't throttle it either, because if we throttle it, they win because they're not throttling it. So we're stuck in this. It's kind of back to the 50s with the nuclear proliferation,
mm.
where there's just no, they just bought or made 100 more ICBMs, and so we need to make 150.
And isn't the entire framing so interesting? The idea of winning. We have to win at all costs. We have to beat them. Why and how and at what cost? Tristan Harris from the Center for Humane Technology talks about this a lot. He's someone I really, really respect. And that narrative in itself is highly problematic, but it's also very strategic because it allows us to justify bypassing all responsible AI, testing and benchmarks and maybe actions that would keep this safe because we have to win, right?
Right.
And we're
Well, and
seeing that in the news, right? With
I think there's
Anthropic.
a concern about, I think this is honestly, it's such a, it doesn't take a massive leap of faith or a leap of, imagination to recognize how, if somebody has more powerful superpowers, that they can impose their will
Mhm.
or control other nations. I mean, it feels like the nations are using this like it is a power dynamic, a superpower like ICBMs and
Yeah.
atomic weaponry.
Yeah. And so, again, trade offs. Do we care about the potential harm that that's going to cause or the harm that is being caused right now in so many different ways because we're rushing through all of the safety things, right? It's trade-offs and who gets to decide? The people with the most money, the four guys running the show, from the tech companies, and it's all about trade-offs, something that could potentially happen in the future versus a lot of harm that's being caused right now and risk.
Well, and so that's the thing. Right now, I think everybody looks at it like, well, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt are going to be just fine if their Seed Dance video that rips their likenesses off, is out there making money for somebody. It's like everybody's going to be fine. But that's not how it's going to spool out,
No.
is it?
No, and I'm actually in the midst of a research study right now dedicated to synthetic media and deepfakes and how the world changes when there is no epistemic truth, when you have no way to ever know if something is real or fake. If you can never prove it, if you never know what to believe, what happens to us as a society if nobody trusts anything ever anymore? And the implications are not great. I'm specifically looking at how leaders make decisions about employees or, things that are happening when they have no way to tell if something is real or fake. There's an interesting concept called the liar's dividend, where people can do terrible things now. And because there's so much flux or uncertainty around whether something's a deepfake or not, someone can just say, that wasn't me, it was a deepfake. We have no way to prove it otherwise. People get away with things. You can just say it was a deepfake, and nobody will ever know any different. And so nobody trusts anything. And what happens in society when we live in a society like that? We've been heading there for a while, but you've seen the same videos in the last 2 weeks that I have. I think these are the best. I know they're the best I've ever seen, and it's really difficult to tell.
Oh no, and it will be nearly impossible, if not completely impossible. And so this has implication. And this is where I play it out. I think Hollywood's in big trouble, and it's mostly the infrastructure of Hollywood that's in big trouble. But Hollywood is entertainment, and that is what it is. Entertainment is entertainment. But where I'm more concerned is in education. So, and I have a hard time playing this out in my mind and the analogy I always use is the kid in the 6th grade who has had this for 3 years and just has the most powerful things that we have ever seen at their disposal. They're 12 years old, and they're going to go to school for 6 more years. And in the last 3 years, we've seen what's happened. What happens in the next 6 with this technology? And then that kid and their parents are going to be entering into a conversation about going to higher education to get an entry-level job and wait 4 more years to then join a workforce where they're to do what? In 10 years' time? To do what? And what happens when we hit that cliff? Because in my mind, to your point around deep fakes and synthetic presentations and not being able to tell the difference between, you and I are in 2 dimensions to one another right now. I know you're real, I'm real, but we're still 2-dimensionally presenting ourselves. It would be easy to create digital
Easier
versions.
than you think. Easier than you think.
And certainly, as a presentation layer for an education delivery,
We're
that
seeing
is
it.
more, that is just more, it's just more beneficial to the learner to have something that they can relate to, somebody they find appealing, somebody that is talking in the languages that they need to hear, rather than this, old school one-to-many delivery at the head of the class, depending upon who's, everybody's at different levels of learning and cognition, and now you can customize the whole thing. And who's to say? I would argue who should stay in that antiquated 19th century design?
I have opinions about this.
Well,
Literally, this is the space that I work in the most. And you can pull traditional, we call it banking style education, where a teacher deposits knowledge into a kid's brain from the front of the class. And during a test, they expect withdrawals. They want you to give it back in exactly how they packaged it. You can pry that from educators' cold, dead hands. Seriously, especially at the post-secondary level. They are clinging onto that model. And it is
they're
a
the
fraud.
worst people to make decisions around this. They are just stuck in a bureaucracy that is not going to be nimble enough to deal with what's coming. Sorry.
Well, it's the
Keep
second
going.
oldest institution in the world, right? And it has never really had to change that much. And it's a really important part of society. Our kids need to be educated. And there are lots of really forward-thinking people. You have to think about Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg talking in front of Congress and trying to basically explain Facebook to them, and they don't understand. A lot of the people who are leading these institutions are in that same boat, of that same generation, right? And so, to their credit, they want to safeguard knowledge and learning. They want kids to grow up and know things. And I have 4 college-age kids, and they were pandemic kids in high school, and now they've gone straight into being AI kids. And my doctor in 10 years will be a kid who probably missed high school and then used AI all the way through college, right? And maybe learned stuff, maybe didn't. And I understand the fear, because educators care. They care about kids and they care about kids learning. And the fear is that kids won't learn. The problem is we conflate this idea of AI being cheating and using AI as a broad, like, that's saying something like electricity causes fires. Okay, yes, but you use electricity in a lot of different ways, and there are ways that you can use it safely, obviously. So we're seeing this, first of all, just lack of understanding at every level. Everybody's figuring this out, but no one figures it out faster than kids, how to cheat and get around this, right? But no one's actually telling kids the why behind the rules or how to leverage this in a way that's useful. It's just kind of this blanket thing. Some educators, some institutions are doing this really, really well. But to your point, like if a kid can learn, there are pros and cons, right? This is a human conversation. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, I don't see a kid's life being changed and them inspired to be like you and I probably were by human teachers, who they became or see themselves as doing more or doing something different. That part matters. But as a learning tool, AI is incredible. Like I am a researcher. I'm taking courses right now. I'm wrapping up like another master's degree specifically in artificial intelligence ethics because it wasn't a degree that existed until 2 years ago. And so I use it as a learning tool, and it is phenomenal to challenge my thinking and help me think bigger. We just need to teach kids to use it like that. We need to just figure out in every job, uh, what part do we really like the human to be involved in, and which part can this be made better? And that's the murky part. And it's different in every subject, and it's different at every level. And it's a balancing act, honestly. Like we don't want kids just plopped in front of a computer for their entire education. And yet, there was a professor, I think somewhere in Ontario, who actually cloned herself, made a deepfake of herself delivering her lesson in multiple languages for her students instantly. And that's amazing. That's useful. That's beneficial because it lowers barriers to entry for knowledge. If, I had a kid who played college basketball and he was just like not into the school end of it. But if we could use AI to give him all of his lecture notes and explain it in a podcast to him using all basketball analogies to explain financial accounting to him, that's a win because we get him through the class and he learns, right? So we're figuring it out as we go. It's messy. Change is messy.
I don't always want to think about the negative because I think about the positive. I think about the kids that are currently bored to tears
Mm.
in their classroom because the teacher is teaching down to the lowest common denominator and they are beyond that and they want stimulation. They want the next lesson. They want the next information delivery. And it only makes sense that we would create customized and very personalized delivery mechanisms. It's absolutely the right thing to do so that the kid who's more sports oriented can get the information through a lens that they relate to and will retain the information better than the single lens that is available to them and everyone their age
Mhm.
that isn't working necessarily for them. So I think there's huge improvements that can happen. But to your point, the existing bureaucracy does not want to hear that there's another way to do this. They are in one of the stages of grief or whatever it is,
Yeah.
around this whole thing. And yeah, there is all kinds of benefits that can come from it. But truth be told, once the public or private, the organizations that hire the graduates
Mm.
give up on this notion, this collusion that you need the piece of paper from the university in order for you to get the job. Once they stop, right now, that's the universal collusion. Everybody's in on it, right? The schools are in on it.
Yep.
The businesses are in on it. The hirers are in on it. That I need a college degree for you to get a job here. Once that goes away, then there's no upside because the ROI was I'll buy this massively expensive education and I'll get an ROI on it over the course of my
Lifetime. Yeah.
yeah career.
And I think that will be upended. And I think people see that coming. A lot of the post-secondary institutions I've spoken to are really worried about that. They're seeing declining enrollment anyway. Costs
Yeah,
alone,
demographically.
prohibitive, right? Like cost prohibitive for a lot of people. Kids aren't seeing the benefit that they used to. going in, this generation is not used to necessarily just the sit and get and then regurgitate. Like they're this TikTok generation. They're this, 148 character or a 30-second short form video kind of generation. Not that it's not important to learn and read and do critical thinking. That matters. I think this generation sees less value in it than previous generations because, for exactly what you said, how can you tell me I need this degree to get a job when A, you're telling me AI is cheating, I can't use it and it's banned, but I see a job market now where people who are running tech companies dropped out of college and are doing great. Every job requirement is have AI understanding, but you're not teaching it to me. And I have a better chance of getting a job with my AI understanding than I ever would if I had an engineering degree.
Well, and so let's shift gears a little bit away from the emerging worker and let's go to the existing workers. So these are the folks, and let's just extend this education analogy. So say in 10 years' time, higher education comes apart at the seams and you have tenured experts around the globe whose business model was to deliver the information they had in exchange for, money. But now that information is easily received effectively free.
Hmm.
And so there's no need to pay this person for that information because that information, quite frankly, isn't all that unique anymore. Nor is their delivery mechanism.
Yeah, yeah, you hope it will be. You hope maybe like throughout history, there has been great reverence shown for the wisdom keepers, the knowledge keepers, those individuals who have all that wisdom. And I can honestly say, I don't think any of these AI tools or agents have wisdom. We know wisdom is knowledge gained through lived experience, right? So maybe one day with world models. But again, lived experience, an AI is never going to have that in the same way. So you hope that maybe they will be the highest paid people in society because people can brag about the fact that they have a human expert, a human guide who has that wisdom and that lived experience that other people are just stuck with an AI. And the richest people in the world get access to the AI plus humans. If it all goes right, that would be great. That means that that wisdom is valued and honored, and then you hope we keep building that into the next generation, right? Because the risk of eliminating all these entry level jobs is suddenly we are not building actual human wisdom and experts for the next generation from the ground up.
So I've been thinking a lot about the idea that people need to start thinking about pivoting to deliver their expertise, and in our world anyway, it's a lot about consultants. So I genuinely feel that what consultants have as their kind of unique, at least traditionally, has been their unique kind of billable hour value is they have more knowledge about this particular, whatever it is, technology
Sure.
area of expertise. And now that if we can see how agents can begin to operate with this massive amount of large language and data, that it would be relatively easy for you to eliminate, maybe not all of your consulting, but half of your billable hours that you're currently paying for
Hmm.
easily,
Hmm.
and keep a couple of the senior people who can kind of interpret it, but you don't really need the emerging, whatever, the associate consultant anymore. And so what happens to these people who are in all these, I mean, it's a, again, this total addressable market, the TAM market that these AI companies are going to go after. One of the total addressable markets that is so huge is all the billable hours from all the consultants. I mean,
Yeah.
that is directly in the sights of OpenAI. I know that they're going after that with APIs and these private implementations within global organizations.
Yeah.
So think about for a second those types of people, and they're beginning to become unemployable in
Mm.
that traditional way, that safe kind of traditional way. What is the pivot here for an expert? What can you see experts? How do they deliver their value? What can they do?
I think there's a couple ways to think about this. I think like zooming out big picture for a second, this is where I think we need to be talking about, or governments need to maybe be incentivizing businesses to keep people, right? A certain, at least, amount of people in entry level positions for stability and for that institutional wisdom and knowledge
That's what
gained,
they did during COVID.
right? And I don't know that that worked necessarily the way they wanted it to, but in this case, there's a lot of risk with a mass unemployment of very specific demographics of people and workers. And I think there needs to be some incentives to keep human workers and invest in them and have them working alongside. We'll need a certain amount of that anyway, because there's a lot that AI still can't do on its own. But from a big picture standpoint, even zoom out even bigger, Sal Khan from Khan Academy has been calling for businesses to band together to donate money towards like these entire countries that are experiencing these mass layoffs because, let's say, in India, where everybody was doing some sort of a job that now can be done by an AI, what happens collectively to us as a society when entire country economies start collapsing? Like, that affects all of us. And so there are calls on this big picture for us all to be thinking and concerned with that. And then in our own countries, like, we need to be incentivizing businesses to be keeping people. For an individual worker, Matt says something in his essay, and I'm not saying Matt's essay is like gospel truth and it's all 100% right, but did he did spit a lot of facts, if we're being honest. He did mention a quote from Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic, that basically says in 50%, in like the next 5 to 10 years, 50% of entry level white collar jobs will be eliminated. And I worry that that might be true. I hope it's not, but I worry that it might be true. And so what Matt suggests,
Eliminated for the
yeah,
humans. So it'll be
yeah,
they'll
oh
be
yeah, the
done
jobs
by
will
they'll be done
exist.
by agents, right? You're
Well, and
saying
one
that
agent can
basically,
do,
or a million
yeah,
agents can
yeah,
do what
there's no
100
cap.
people can do. There's
Yeah.
right.
So
It's just bandwidth.
really what he says, and I agree with it, and this is what I've been trying to tell people, is like, figure it out. Don't wait for your company to give you a PD. You need to sit your butt down for 1 hour a day and play with AI and figure out how it can help you be better at your job. Be good at your job and be good at AI. That is your best defense. Knowledge is power. We've been saying that forever. And the knowledge is power aspect is understand the landscape, figure out what's going on here and lean into it, figure out how you can benefit from this. Become the go to person in your organization or your industry. That's what I did, who understands the industry and understands how AI works in that industry. And that gives you an advantage. And at this point, we need to be thinking about our own advantages. We need to be helping position our companies in ways that are, yes, uh, financially beneficial, but also like ethically, like, what are our obligations as companies? Lots of people don't care, but this is going to affect everybody. And if you think you're just in a bubble, you're you're going to feel this either from other countries, the world economy, from society. Like, everybody needs to be doing a little bit of their part. And the time has come to just sit down and figure it out. Like, there's no shortage of free resources. You have optimal access to every AI tool for free. There is no barrier to entry. There is no excuse. This is just something you have to figure out. If you decided, 20 years ago that the internet wasn't for you, like, that wouldn't have been super wise at the time and long term. And this is that. A lot of people, and Matt mentions this, they tried AI like when it first came out, like 2 years ago, and they were like, that sucked. It's not even good. It's not even smart. It makes stuff up. That is not this. Paul Reitzer, who has the Artificial Intelligence Show, it's a podcast. He's a friend of mine. He said something interesting in his podcast this week that it's kind of like people who've only ever used the internet for sending emails and they didn't realize all these other parts of the internet existed and what exactly this made possible. That's what I feel like we're at. And people might think, well, AI, it's just for this. It's just for email, the internet. It's bigger than that. And it's time to just kind of dig in.
I hear people saying, it's going to be so easy for people to start businesses. You'll have the first kind of solopreneur businesses that'll be worth $1 billion and blah, blah, blah. And everybody should go out and start a business. And every time I think about that, having started a business myself, I think, Doing what exactly? It's like, it sounds great. It's easy. It's easy. But what's the trick in any business is where you find value. How
Mhm.
you're gonna actually get people to pay you. It's one thing to say I have a business. It's another
Yeah,
thing to say I have a profitable business, or I have a business that is actually growing and potentially employing people or agents. And I come back to the same thing with regard to AI skills.
mm,
Every time I've used AI, and I use it a lot, I'm more than a little overwhelmed by the
yeah,
output.
yeah,
It's almost like at the end of every chat, I have to say, okay, now take everything we just talked about for the last half hour and boil it down to something that I can actually use, because I've gone so deep and it's
yeah,
gone so wide, and
yeah,
we're now there's no way I can make this. I couldn't show this to anybody. This is like
yeah,
unbelievable output,
totally.
but I can't. It's unusable. There's so much information that has been dumped into this
Fire
chat
hose for sure.
that I
Yeah,
don't know what
and
to do with it anymore. And so I don't even. And so I look at my chat history, and it's just this like
mm,
train wreck of I look like a toddler who's
yeah,
started
everybody.
building things and put them away, and built things and put them away. And so what do you say, what would be a few things that people could hang on to in terms of what they should learn? So there's so much that they could potentially, you know, begin to come up to speed around. Is there any kind of go-tos that you like?
I think the biggest message that people need to hear is to think smaller. I think, we're tempted and AI does help us think big. And there's a lot of new studies coming out showing how it makes you so much less productive because of exactly what you said, the capabilities, and it gives you all of this, then you end up overwhelmed and you don't actually get anything done. But if you think smaller, and where I would suggest people start, if you've already been experimenting with chats, my personal favorite is Claude, but Claude has a feature called Claude Cowork. And it's kind of like a simpler version of Claude Code, but really it can work with anything on your computer. And if you just think of one thing that you hate to do, let's say, so you can give a folder to Claude Cowork and it will organize your entire downloads. Just say, organize this into categories, rename everything as to what's exactly in the file, organize it for me in a way that makes sense, and do this every day at 3 p.m. at the end of my day. That's a small thing that maybe you burned some of your mental energy on before, something you've been meaning to get to. See how it does at that. And as you work on small things, you have a little bit more freed up bandwidth to think about something bigger. Oh, if it can do this, well, then I wonder then if it could go through all of those, you know, client files. Or for me, I did academic research papers. They've all just like DOIs. I don't know what any of them are. It organized them. It built a giant spreadsheet by topic that I could easily reference and renamed everything by the author and the year. Like things like that are helpful. And then as you experiment with little things like that, you start to think more about what's possible in your lane of expertise, things that you're already doing that can be done better. And then it's tiny little Lego building blocks from there. In my experience, that's how I got good at using AI is I'd be like, oh, early on, I can give AI like some data and it can tell me, let me give it all my Peloton data and have it tell me like which instructor's classes I work the hardest in. And then from there, you can say, you can build your way up to, and Allie K. Miller is like brilliant, but she just has a prompt. You copy and paste in, it builds you a board of directors with Brene Brown and Tony Robbins and everyone who looks at your business files and says, here's where you can monetize this. Where should we start? And it's just getting that experience of starting small, seeing what's possible, and then starting to think a little bit bigger based on your scope that you already exist in. You don't have to go out and do something brand new.
Well, so let's talk about what makes us human,
Mm,
versus um, this thing, which in my mind can do a really good job of pretending to be human,
really good.
representing itself as empathetic, representing itself as sympathetic, or enthusiastic, or whatever it does, right? Sycophantic. So what makes us human? I mean, I know we have emotions, and I know those are, one might argue, going to get in the way. But talk a little bit about kind of what you see as our advantage in this future?
Going back to the pandemic even, I think for a lot of us, like, being isolated was hard, and we just kind of craved being with other people. That social experience, the energy of being in a room with people together, um, having shared experiences, it's that's hard to replace, and I feel like a lot of us experienced that in the last 5 or 6 years, like, just I miss going to a concert and having that shared experience, or, those little things that as much as we can say, "Oh, people drive us nuts," or, "I don't like being around people," which is kind of trendy now. When you call Delta, like, you wanna talk to an agent, you wanna talk to a human, right? Like, there's something about that that still matters. Um, I will tell you, like, again, on the heels of the pandemic, and it's so interesting, we went through this just before the AI boom. That really caused, like, a loneliness epidemic. It disconnected people. It forced people into these relationships with technology that are still remain unhealthy. And I think if anything, that helped us realize more the value of that human piece and that human connection. Like, we didn't keep kids in online school. We sent them back to be with human teachers and with their friends and to play
Right.
sports. I don't want to cheer for my team at an Olympics where humans are competing against robots. I don't want to go see Hamilton on Broadway played by robots. There's something that we crave, like, on a primal, like, human level about connecting with and being with other people and having human experiences. And the hope is that the things that we can get done quickly, and this is very cliche and I get tired of hearing it, but you hope that AI can do the stuff so we free ourselves up to have more time for those human experiences. The latest research is telling us that actually we're experiencing more burnout because we can be doing this all the time and the productivity never ends. And so we're doing more and we're doing more outside of our scopes. But I think as we get better at setting boundaries on that, for example, like, I run a business too, right? So I'm used to doing things all day long and into the evening. But with the help of some of this AI I've been using the last few weeks, I had everything done that I needed to get done by 11 o'clock one day. And I sat for a minute and I thought, well, my option here is I can start into something new, build a new project, make a new business, like whatever it is, or I can actually use this gift of time to do something that matters, right? And so I chose to do that. I chose to go, like, visit some family. I chose to go, like, for a walk outside. I intentionally chose some of those human experiences, and it made a difference in my mental health for that day, for that week. And it was a gift that technology gave me that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And we're going to have to figure that out as we go because there'll be endless opportunities for productivity. But there's still, that's what makes us human, and I hope we lean into that. I hope we're incentivized to lean into that. I hope we do that.
It feels like we're, you mentioned the pandemic as kind of its own phenomenon of that has had ripple effects, but even prior to this social media
Mm.
revolution that we've gone through, which was a complete experiment in dopamine release, and I mean all the science around scrolling and
And
likes.
we're
And
doing it again now. Like, let's be clear. That's what's going to happen now again, and we haven't even solved that problem
I
yet.
would
I
argue,
think
no, and I would argue that problem has created more isolation. I mean, you can't not see the isolation that
mm,
exists on the subway or
yeah.
just walking down the hall of an office park like I do every day and see people walk by me with their head down looking at a screen while they're walking around. Or the people who are at the red light and can't not look at their phone,
Yeah.
which is one of my pet peeves, by the way, when somebody can't see the light turn green because they immediately went to their screens. But the amount of isolation where you actually feel, again, as a human, you're being tricked into feeling like you're connected to everything and
Yeah.
that this is interactive and this is, your sensory, you know, is firing.
An interesting point about that I think about a lot because my background is comms and words and those things. I just think about how the tech industry has hijacked the word friend, right? Like, you have all these friends on Facebook, right? But they're not really your friends. And they've hijacked the word community. And it used to be that community was where you lived and you didn't choose your neighbors. You just figured out how to get along with the people in your community who were all different and all part of your geographical location, but you were part of something. And now the word community is maybe the TikTok comment section you live in, or the X list, or the Facebook group, where it's people who are just like you. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And so these words of friends and community that used to be so deeply representative of the human experience don't mean the same things anymore. And we don't necessarily have good replacements for those. I just find it interesting.
There's so much going on that is emerging and experimental, and it does make you wonder, how it all ends. How does it end? It's what do we look like in 10 years? Or I being on the enterprise tech side, I do have this, as much as some of these articles of these AI leaders, it's a little self-serving, the Matt Schumer one, in
Totally.
fairness, because
Well,
he is building a self-sustaining, whatever, self-directed AI technology. I mean, he wants the story out there that his tool is, completely
sure.
autonomous, and I get
Sure.
all that.
Interesting about the Schumer essay too is that just as of a week ago, X started rewarding long form content. And this was the first kind of example of, obviously, I think they want more stuff to train on. So if you write an essay and publish it to X, that's getting rewarded by the algorithm, which is probably part of the reason it went so viral. And it went viral. And I understand that he's a tech guy and he has his own reasons for doing this. However, my experience and my insights are so similar to his as someone who is not that it's hard for me to dismiss that as a reason. Other people were like, "Oh, of course, he used AI to help him write it." It doesn't make it any less real or any less true, some of it, which then raises a lot of other questions about that everyone can agree on about using AI in general and when and how. But anyway, it's all part of a very, very interesting conversation that I think will be going on for a long time, and that's what's interesting. Every day, it's a different aspect of this conversation, and maybe hopefully this conversation is what makes us human, talking about it and dissecting it and figuring out what we want that future to look like and that sense-making experience collectively. Hopefully, that is part of the process that takes us to where we wanna be.
Well, it's interesting. As I've been getting into video podcasting, and at Insight Jam, we do a lot of panel discussions. We have smart people like yourself giving keynotes at our Insight Jams. And what I've come to realize, because one of the other mind-boggling narratives is that we're out of data. That
Mm.
that all the data in the world has been ingested and trained, and there's no more data, and so they're desperately
Hmm.
trying to figure out where the new data is, and all this AI slop is basically regurgitated from all the existing data. And my epiphany here is that the new data is through conversations like this,
Yep,
that we're creating data right now that didn't
exactly.
exist through these
Brilliant.
conversations, that humans talking to humans is the new data, that
Mm.
that the conversation itself is creating new data every day that didn't exist, because I didn't know you were going to go there, you didn't know I was going to go there, and we went into an interaction that is all new, and now it can be ingested as new data, as signal for the
Mhm.
LLMs through obviously through some sort of transcripting or whatever. But more to the point, the LLMs are going to look at these human conversations as like, which is interesting, because I saw the X thing too, where they had the kind of like, it was an article competition. I think Elon Musk was going to give $1 million to the best article written on X, just as a way to get words written. But in the end, I thought, well, all these words are mostly going to be written by LLMs. It's not really new information. It's just repackaged existing information generated by some engine. Whereas really where you want to look for the new data is in the human conversation.
I hadn't thought about that before. I love that idea. That's so brilliant because you're right. We're creating something here that has never existed before in this space. You and I have never had a conversation. We're creating something brand new. And I think that's valuable. And I've said from the very beginning, as soon as I saw ChatGPT write something that quickly, I knew instantly that we were going to be moving more towards an oral society again. Because in some ways, talking to someone face to face is going to be the only way you'll ever know you're experiencing another person in real time. And when you talk to a kid about what they learned, that's going to be the only way, if you see the words coming out of their mouth in person, that they actually have that in their brain and they're able to explain it, right? There's all of these. So, in the end, maybe this just pushes us to even more interpersonal communication and recorrects us back from this texting, tweeting, emailing society that we've devolved to, where we've become so heavily reliant on the impersonal form of written kind of communication. And it just drives us back to this. And I love that idea. Thank you. I'm going to take that with me.
Well, there you go. Glad to offer it up. Well, this has been great, Rebecca. I appreciate the time. You're absolute rock star these days. It sounds like your dance card is full, but obviously, where can people connect with you if they're so inclined?
You know what? I post what I'm thinking about on LinkedIn. I have a Substack that's called Yes and Also No, where I look at some of the yes is amazing, but also no. And I've actually been posting kind of a series on there to help people get started with Claude Code. But really, yeah, I'm just always up for a good conversation, just like this. I'm a verbal processor. That's how I use my AI almost exclusively. I rarely type anything. I do everything verbally, and yeah, I love interesting ideas and people and reading and understanding new things. So you can find me talking about those things probably somewhere on the internet.
Well, tremendous. Thank you very much for the time today, and best of luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks so much.